Hello and welcome to the Game 3 podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. We have a Jimmy Butler trade finally. He's going to the Golden State Warriors, a place that Bryce and I have talked about as a fairly obvious fit now for months, basically since this whole thing has happened. We're excited to break that all down because it's an insane 5-team trade that we're all still trying to piece together. We'll talk about that and more, but first, let's hit the music.
They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Way downtown.
Bang! Bang! What's this going to be? Wow! Are you kidding me?
Hello and welcome to the Game 3 podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. But if you watch the tape, what you will see completely orchestrated this game. Bryce, what's going on, buddy?
What's up, Sam? Man, I appreciate them getting this deal done before midnight and doing it at a decent time for us to go ahead and record and talk about it, where I got a chance to do so. This is also maybe the only episode I'll record where my wife will actually listen after the fact because she loves Jimmy Butler. Although when the trade came across, she was fairly disappointed that he was just going from one coast to the other coast and not somewhere a little bit more in the center of the United States. So still the same distance away, but at least she knows who Jimmy Butler is as we talk about this one.
Okay, so details of the trade as we have them right now. Jimmy Butler's going to Golden State. The Heat are going to take Andrew Wiggins, and they're going to get PJ Tucker from Utah. And then they're also going to get a 2025 top 10 protected first round pick from Golden State. The Utah Jazz are going to take Dennis Schroder, who's coming via Golden State. The Detroit Pistons are going to take Josh Richardson from Miami, Lindy Waters from Golden State, and a second round pick, as reported from, I think, your guy, Omari Sankofa.
Yep.
And then the Toronto Raptors are also going to get involved from Miami via Golden State and take Kyle Anderson here. So this is a 5-team deal. I mean, reporters to credit here, Anthony Slater and Sam Amick and Marcus Thompson, I think, were the first people to publicly say this was close. Shams reported it at some point. Omari got that detail. I think Jake Fisher might have gotten the Jazz detail. All these shout out to all of you. Right.
I mean, I'll shout out Amari as well. Like, he's trying to cover a Pistons game as we speak. Like, the Pistons are playing the Cavs down 2 in the third quarter, and he's trying to get like scoops on what draft pick, who from, that type of. So shout out all of these guys for what they're doing right now.
Oh my goodness. And then the second big piece of this that matters is that Jimmy Butler is now signing an extension where he will decline his player option for next season and sign a 2-year, $112-ish million contract. I would imagine that there's at least not going to be a player or a team option there, because if that's the case, then he's not really adding any value for himself, really. So, like, I would assume that that's just going to be like a straight 2-year extension. Okay. We have talked a lot about Jimmy Butler to the Warriors. I think that you and I have said, like, if it's not going to be Memphis, the place that makes the most sense is Golden State. Like, that's kind of where we threw our hat in immediately. You know, I've been kind of saying for a while that I didn't really think that Jimmy was going to find a way to Phoenix. And I thought it was either going to be like Milwaukee, Golden State, or he stays in Miami, honestly. When you see, let's just take the Golden State side of this first, since there are 45 other angles we could talk about. This just makes sense for Golden State. Like, they need to do something, or else we're going into like land where it's like a Jonathan Kuminga led Golden State team moving forward. Like, after Stephen Curry retires, they need a secondary creator. They need somebody like Jimmy Butler to be able to step up. This is an obvious move.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this going all the way back to the offseason or coming into the season where, you know, I thought this team and their depth were going to be able to win a lot of games in the regular season. That hasn't proven to be as true. But that they would have to make a move like this at the deadline to be real contenders. Now, does this actually make them contenders or not? I don't know. They're one game above 500 right now with, 30 games left, 32 games left, wherever we're at. And how quickly can they get Jimmy Butler in sync with Steph and Draymond and figure out the rest of the roster, as Andrew Wiggins was having a good season for the Golden State Warriors. So figuring all of that out will obviously be super important. But I mean, I understand people, these guys all in their mid 30s, and there's a real chance it goes south, right? There's a real chance it does not work. But I think you had to do something because Steph Curry is in his mid 30s and you only have one or two more chances. Also want to point out all three of those guys, Steph, Jimmy, and Draymond, those contracts will all end the same year, depending on the exercise of player options and whatever. But Draymond has one in 26-27. Curry's contract ends in 26-27, and Jimmy's will be 26-27 as well, whether it's no options, club option, or player option.
And we're 6 minutes into the show, and apparently the Kyle Anderson to Toronto portion of this has fallen through, according to Shams. So we're now down to a 4-team deal. We'll see. Maybe there will be a resolution for Kyle Anderson. Okay. The Jimmy side of this for the Warriors, to me, just makes a ton of sense. Like, they need a pretty real creator on offense. They tried to kind of stopgap it with Dennis Schroder. That just did not work out. Schroder has been really, really bad for Golden State. There's not really another way to phrase it. He has not been nearly, good enough in the role to allow them to succeed. Also, Brandon Podziemski has not had a successful season. They needed somebody who, when Stephen Curry leaves the court, can take on more of an offensive load. And also, frankly, when Stephen Curry is on the court, can take on more of an offensive load. Curry this year has been interesting. I think he's generally been pretty good. I will say, though, that there are games where you do feel like he is not as involved as what we've seen previously in his career. He will have games where he will just be off of the ball a lot more often. It could be that the legs don't have it anymore because he's 35, 36 years old. It could be that, he feels like he needs to just take a little blow. There are so many different reasons why this could be the case. But I do think that having Jimmy Butler be able to take offensive, primary creative responsibilities with Steph on the court will allow Steph to be a more lethal offensive off-ball player, which we've seen him do successfully in the past. This is really what Golden State needed, in my opinion. They needed somebody who isn't just Dennis Schroder level, primary creator. They needed a genuine, real, 1A, 1B option to be able to put next to Stephen Curry, so that when Steph is able to go off the ball, or when Steph just has a night where he's just wiped, they have somebody else that can play, and also that can play and allow Steph to play off the ball more consistently and help him get to the playoffs at a little bit of a, higher level.
Well, and when we did our all NBA stuff, I had some people push back on Steph Curry being all NBA, but there's one thing that's undeniable. There's not many guys that have more gravity than Steph Curry. When Steph Curry is, especially off the ball, when Steph Curry is running off the screen, off the ball, when he's running around doing what he does, he attracts two guys a lot. And so now if you have the pressure of Jimmy Butler with the ball in his hands, and Steph is running around off the ball, distracting or getting open or whatever, there's just a lot more things you can do, right? Jimmy's pressuring the paint. You have an off-ball action with Steph. Either guys are going to help and now Steph is going to be open, or guys aren't going to help because they're chasing Steph and Jimmy essentially gets to play one-on-one. So assuming health, assuming legs, Jimmy should be quite rested based on the amount of games he's had to play recently.
Yeah, right.
So hopefully he has some juice for the rest of the season. Again, I'm hard pressed to just be like, oh yeah, this makes them contenders when all of these guys are 35 years old, or in their mid 30s, I should say, but it makes sense. I do not blame the Warriors. And at the end of the day, what they traded Wiggins and the first are the real big assets here. I know Schroder made a lot of sense when they made the move, but I think we always thought this was going to be the outcome for him anyway, because of when they traded for him, he was going to get moved again.
So, just a couple notes on like the way that this deal like goes down, right? So the reason that the Pistons are involved here is because the initial deal is like a 3-team deal. If you just do Butler for Wiggins, Anderson, and Schroder, it doesn't work via the CBA because I think they're both first apron teams, if I remember correctly. If you just include Waters to Miami, it pushes Miami over the line. If you just include if you try to include Josh Richardson on top of that with Lindy Waters, it pushes Golden State back over the line. So there had to be a third team involved here in order to be able to assess or to be able to make this work via the collective bargaining agreement, right? So the reason that the Pistons are here is because of that. Then after this, like with Schroder going to Utah, Toronto trying to figure out what it's going to do with Kyle Anderson seemingly, that's where we start having like little breakdowns. But like, I just want to be clear with people, like this deal is like not going to fall through. That's why the Pistons are here. It's because like Jimmy Butler to Golden State is like good. Like that piece of it is clean as we're talking here live. The thing I want to just note for people, and we've talked about this previously when Jimmy originally like asked for his trade. People I think of like question like how much juice does Jimmy have left? Like what's going on here? In the 11 games before he got ill and then like sat out a few games and then also ended up in like this circumstance where he's frustrated about his contract and then, getting suspended and everything. In the 11 games before that, the Miami Heat went 8-3. He averaged 22 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, a steal, half a block versus only 1 turnover per game. Shot 60% from the field and drew 8 fouls a game and shot 81% on those shots. Like when Jimmy Butler decides to be engaged, Jimmy Butler is a stud still. Like he is an awesome, ridiculous basketball player, like a truly, truly awesome basketball player that is probably still one of the top 15 to 20 players in the league at this point. And we know what he can be whenever things get into the playoffs. This is a real two-way force that the Golden State Warriors are acquiring. They get not only what Andrew Wiggins does defensively, but they also get what they need offensively from a secondary primary creator on that end of the court, all tied into one player. And I think that that's the thing that like people miss a lot of the time. Whenever you have to piecemeal it in different ways, that's where things kind of break down. That's where things get really difficult to make work because you're trying to piecemeal one player being able to do this, one player doing that. It makes it really hard to create lineups that work together. The thing is that now that you have Jimmy Butler there all in one player, you can just say, okay, we can build a crazy number of different lineups now around Stephen Curry, Draymond Green, and Jimmy Butler. That's the key here and why Jimmy Butler is such a sharp acquisition for the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah, because with him, this is the 9th rated defense in the NBA. I don't imagine it's going to go south with Jimmy Butler coming there. It may not improve because I think Andrew Wiggins, when we talk about Miami, we'll talk more about him, but I don't think it's not going to get negative, but this is the 20th offense in the NBA right now. And that's where you hope to see some real growth is by bringing in Jimmy Butler. And I know people don't want to hear this about a guy making $50 million or whatever he is, but when you're not happy, you're not happy. And if he's happy now because he got paid, I can't imagine there isn't some sort of excitement about playing with Steph Curry and the Warriors. Hopefully that engages Jimmy. It motivates Jimmy. And again, I'm not saying it should take that. I'm not saying he should have been unhappy where he was, whatever. I don't get into that stuff. But when a player changes scenery, we've seen it where it's worked to their benefit in terms of they're locked in, they're engaged. And as you say, when we see a locked in, engaged Jimmy Butler, it's pretty good. I am fascinated to see like the Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green dynamic, because the intensity of both of those guys, the personalities, I think could be really good. But if you told me that they clashed in some way, I could see that as well.
Yeah.
So I think that will be fascinating also.
Yeah, it's a lot of strong personalities now in Golden State. And look, like, I think this is a sharp move for them. What it does is, depending on what they do with Jonathan Kuminga now moving forward in the offseason, and by the way, we should talk about that just for a second. This is a weird fit now with Butler, Kuminga, and Draymond. Now, Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green, I think, are often quite underrated off-ball players, even though that neither of them are like super, super high-level shot makers or anything. Or Jimmy's a high-level shot maker, but I mean from the beyond the three-point line, right? They do move without the ball at an exceedingly high level and can really pass and process it quickly and maintain advantages quickly in a way that I think will really work in the Golden State offense. That's why I actually really love the Jimmy fit within the Golden State offense. He is willing to cut, move off the ball, make quick decisions, pass, play make. Like, just because he's not a big three-point shooter doesn't mean that he doesn't have gravity as an offensive player. I think that's a really, really important factor here. But I do worry a little bit about Kuminga's fit here. I would guess that the way teams operate is they just like pull a defender off of Kuminga and decide, hey, like, we're going to sit in the paint and we're going to stop Jimmy from getting to the line. Or getting to the paint. We're going to stop Draymond from like being able to short roll and like dump off to Trace Jackson Davis. Neither of their centers are shooters. Honestly, I do kind of like the idea now of them going to get Nikola Vucevic.
Sure.
If they could do Vucevic for like the Gary Payton II and Kevon Looney contracts, that's kind of an intriguing move now, in my opinion. But they do need like a little bit of space in order to make certain lineups work now from the center position. Vooch is probably like a 20 to 25 minute per game guy for them. But I think that there is space for something like that to kind of be the next step here.
I mean, they have been starting. My guy Quentin Post has got 3 starts here recently, and that's kind of his archetype. Obviously, Vooch much more established and all of that, like no question there. But just to your point of maybe that's what they're looking for with Post, they're getting those minutes. Yeah, Kuminga is so fascinating on this team. If I was Golden State, I would struggle with like wanting to give him up as well. But he also just doesn't seem like he fits. You know, I watched them play. I brought it up before. There was a play where he drove middle, made the easiest read to the weak side you can imagine, and the shot was missed. And Kerr's over there like clapping up a storm. And I just read it as like Steve was so excited that Kuminga actually made the right read, the right pass. He just seems like such an isolation heavy player, but he's not so good at it that you just turn it over to him when you have these other guys, especially now with the Jimmy Butler on the team. So does it even make sense running the second unit, right? Because you're probably going to stagger Steph and Jimmy a little bit and let Jimmy just, do his thing with Steph on the bench at times. So it will be very interesting to see what his role continues to be for this team. As a talent, I understand why they haven't moved him, but just incorporating him in the rotation with different lineups and where he gets his shots is not easy necessarily.
Yeah, and just for the record here, in terms of like a deal structure that works for Vooch, Gary Payton, Kevon Looney, Guy Santos is a deal that works. The Bulls, it seems like they're gonna, potentially be in the market to move like a Zach Collins or a Trey Jones or a Kevin Huerter or something before the deadline tomorrow. Taylor Horton Tucker is still on this roster. Like, he could very easily be cut as well if they needed to do something there. Nikola Vucevic, the Warriors would have to like sign like 5 guys in the next couple of days if they decide to do a 3-for-1 deal with Vooch, which would be really, really tricky. But I mean, hey, you never know at this time of year. Maybe they're just going to be willing to do it.
Because they sent out, I mean, just for the numbers, they sent out 5 in this trade and only got 1 back as we understand it right now. So they are at a roster shortage, 4 open spots as we currently understand the structure of the deal.
Yeah. So look, Jimmy Butler gets what he wants. He doesn't get to Phoenix, but he gets the money. And frankly, I think gets to play in a situation that fits just as well. Next, you go to Miami. They get a first-round pick here. They get Andrew Wiggins, who, based on the way he's played this season, is an asset. I think Wiggins works well, and now you're moving from Steve Kerr to Eric Spoelstra. I don't think you have to worry too much necessarily about like him really struggling to get shots or anything like that, or being created for. They have Bam Adebayo there. They have Tyler Hero there. I do think that there is a world where like they could just as easily move Wiggins like in the offseason, maybe try and move him before the deadline here if you wanted to. But honestly, if I was them, I'd probably want to keep Wiggins for this year and then maybe look at it in the offseason and see where it goes. I would think that like you could just move him. I don't know how much asset value you would get, but I think you could just move him fairly easily.
I think if I'm Miami, because you're not trying to tank if you're Miami, right? You're trying to win as many games as you can still behind Bam, behind an all-star level season from Tyler Hero. I would just move Wiggins in there as a starter and see how many games we can win this year, because you get to this offseason and now he does only have 2 years left on his deal. And so, as you mentioned, maybe it's not a negative. He's had a good season. Andrew Wiggins is scoring 18 points on 44, 38, 78, 4.5 rebounds. Not a huge assist guy, but not a huge turnover guy either. I don't know that he's the defender he was at, during their title run, but he's not a negative defender by any means. Like, he's a good quality player. You add that to this Miami rotation, and it's interesting. Again, are they competing with Boston or New York or Cleveland? Probably not. I don't think so. But again, they're not going to go backwards the rest of the season. So you might as well put him in there, play, see if you can maybe raise the value, or maybe he really, really fits somehow and he's part of this rotation moving forward, whatever this next step ends up being for the Heat.
Yep, totally agree. The thing with Wiggins, though, is he does have 2 years after this one on his deal, which gets a little bit complicated because everything I know about Miami is that they would like to have space to be able to go and play in the free agency market of 2026.
True.
And getting Wiggins complicates that a little bit because Wiggins, Bam, and Hero would all be signed for that year. And they also have a number of young players that they would likely, prefer to retain during that time. Anything else with Miami? Like, they get off of this for a first round pick. Like, it feels like this was kind of where it was always ordained to go. I thought that if they were going to be able to do it a little bit earlier, they might have been able to get a second first round pick. But, end of the day, I'm not super surprised that it only ended up being one because of how Butler ended up kind of tanking all of this in like trying to get to Phoenix. And then, it ends up that we're 2 days before the deadline, less than 24 hours before the deadline.
Yeah.
And he's still on the Miami Heat. So you end up losing a bit of leverage there to be able to do what you want to do. This feels like a win just to kind of end it for the Heat.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about it. I don't know. We've recorded a lot recently. One of the episodes we talked about how, like, does this end up being a deal where Miami just has to take 1 year rental or half a year rental price for Jimmy Butler? Obviously Golden State's not getting him for just a half a year rental because he signed the extension. This is still kind of what I would have expected if they were going to do that, though, where I'm probably a little higher on Andrew Wiggins than most people are. Like, I've come back around watching him this year, and maybe it's just because I really enjoy Wiggins bouncing back. I think he's going to be good there. I think he's going to really help that team. First round pick, we'll see, right? I mean, if this thing goes well for I don't know how far they could get in the West. There's no reason to do that till we see how everything else plays out tomorrow. So we think this is probably late teens, early 20s pick, late teens pick, probably.
Yeah, something like that. That's not terrible.
Yeah. So something there. And yeah, would you like more for Jimmy Butler? Sure. You bring up a good point with the 26-27 year on Wiggins deal. I still think you can probably move that if you need to and you want to get in that free agent market, especially if he comes there and continues to play the way he's been playing. So I don't think you hamstrung yourself too much there. It just was, this wasn't the same market as some other guys. He's 35 years old. He needed a new deal. He had been a pain through the whole process. 1 first-round pick and a solid rotation 3-and-D wing. You could do worse, even though it may seem underwhelming whenever you say Jimmy Butler got traded for that return.
Yeah, and look, like if they really truly wanted to get off of the Wiggins deal, like Memphis for Marcus Smart, like is probably there in the offseason. It's
That's
probably there
sure.
right now. Like, you know, I'm not saying that they're talking. I'm saying that like that's a
Smart
deal that
only
make
has
sense
one
across
deal
the board.
or 1 year left, right?
Smart only has 1 year left.
Yeah.
Wiggins has 2 years left after this. Like if they really truly just wanted to get off the money, I'm saying, like, I'm not, you know, I think that would be there pretty easily.
Adding that kind of wing for Memphis, even though I'm the one that says they have plenty of wings all the time, but he's a good one. Interesting. Huh.
Yeah, like Memphis might even give you a first-round pick to do that. Like I don't know.
I would not do that if I was Miami, but I understand if they just want to make sure they're ready. I would let Andrew Wiggins play out this season and just kind of see what it looks like, and then move him in the offseason or at next year's deadline, right? He's, half a season. He only has 1 year left. He's not an expiring, but that contract is very palatable if he continues to play the way he has been. And I see no reason why he won't in Miami with what they do down there. I think he could be a pretty valuable trade name at 12 months from now, I guess.
Right. And the only reason I bring that up is literally just to say that if the goal is cap space in the summer of 2026, I don't think they're going to have any problems moving Wiggins to be able to get that cap space if they truly want it. Okay. From YouTube user, Miami a playoff team or a play-in team now? I would say right on the edge. It depends on if Orlando kind of figures its shit out, in all honesty.
Yeah, like I don't listen. I watch the Pistons every night. I think they end up in the play-in. The other 5 teams are locked in. I do think it comes down to them and the Magic, and Orlando, needs to figure their stuff out because all of a sudden they got healthy and then they got worse. I don't understand. Not completely healthy, but 2 of their. Did we get a Lonzo Ball extension as well? Did this break?
Yeah, I want to run through the end of this thing.
Okay,
and then we'll talk about Lonzo in a second.
Okay.
Yeah, so the Jazz get Dennis Schroder. Have I seen a report that he's probably not going to play for them?
I've been trying to follow stuff on Twitter. I have not seen that.
Let's see here. Is Schroder going to play for them? Let's see.
As you looked at looked that up, the only thing I said to you before we started recording, they just have a lot of guards already in the mix there between Sexton, Clarkson, and then the 2 young guys in Collier and Keontae George. Now, do any of those guys get moved? And then now he makes more sense to have in the fold. It just seems like a tough spot to make sure your young guys get minutes, but also give these vets minutes, and adding him to the mix would seem to complicate that even more. You made an interesting point about just being better and more competent there. But that was my first thought, which is like, why would Utah necessarily want to get involved in this?
Yeah, no, I don't see anything about him. Maybe he does stay there then. But they get the 2nd round pick. They get a 2031 2nd round pick, and I think that's probably what they're looking for here.
Okay, so they got a pick to take him as well.
The Jazz get a 2nd round pick. And then the other piece of this is the Pistons, and this is tied with the Kenyon Martin Jr. deal earlier. They are taking Kenyon Martin into, either space or the room exception that they have.
Yeah.
Based off of this deal, I would guess that the way they structure this is they wait to have the Kenyon Martin deal happen until like right before the deadline. I'm sure it'll happen. And then they put this move into their cap space.
Yeah.
I would guess that that's the way it works. They could find different ways, but if they do it that way and they wait until like near the end and put Kenyon Martin Jr. into their cap space or into their room exception, they can use their cap space up to a certain number, which would mean they still have something like $8 to $9 million to play with in cap space to be able to take on more money from other teams, more assets. They've already gotten 3 second-round picks now for the ability to be able to do that. Bryce, you kind of mentioned to me what you're thinking in regard to this earlier.
Yeah, I just wonder if Trajan goes, okay, I've got 3 second-round picks for free. Now I don't, and they already actually had a surplus of seconds, even though they were at a negative with first. I don't feel bad if I send 2 seconds plus a contract for insert player that helps our rotation for the rest of the year, right? I don't know who that is. Lonzo was actually a name that has come up a lot with Pistons fans. I know we'll talk about him here in just a little bit now because of what just happened with his contract, but it just would make sense. Like, hey, they literally have not sent out anything to get 3 second-round picks. And so you don't feel bad if you send them out. I also think there's a world where like KJ could get aggregated if he goes into the cap space, which I think they could still do, right? Like they could take all 3 of these guys into the cap space, I believe, and still have the room. And then KJ could get aggregated with somebody else on the roster to hit money. Like they just have a lot of different avenues, I get. Like I have yet to really comment or post or Substack about any of this until tomorrow afternoon, because I have no idea which of these guys end up on the team and what ends up happening. And I just feel like I'm going to waste time if I do something and don't wait.
Yeah, they just have so many different options. Yeah. They just have so many different options at this point to be able to play around with, and we'll see where it goes from there. Okay. Before we get to the Lonzo Ball deal, we want to shout out our good friends over at PrizePicks, potentially at PrizePicks, as soon as I get this banner off the screen. Shout out to the good folks over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks is has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. We love PrizePicks here at Game Theory because of how easy they make it to get real money sports action. If you think Justin Jefferson or somebody else is particularly in the Super Bowl, somebody like Xavier Worthy, if you think he's going to score a touchdown, if you think Pat Mahomes from Bryce's Kansas City Chiefs is going to go crazy against Philadelphia Eagles, if you think any sort of thing, you can make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on PrizePicks. Download the app today and use the code Game Theory to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today and use the code Game Theory to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. As Bryce noted a second ago, Lonzo Ball has signed a 2-year, $20 million extension with the Chicago Bulls. That doesn't take him off the market, does it? Because I think that
I wondered about that as well.
Yeah, because he's signing an extension for less than what he makes right now. So I do believe he can be traded. But cool story to me, like an amazing story that Lonzo Ball has come back after 1,000 days out of basketball and is now here where he is 2 more years where he's going to get $10 million each year. Shout out to Lonzo Ball. Like unbelievable, unbelievable story. If there was a comeback player of the year in the NBA this year, it would 100% be Lonzo Ball to me. He is impactful. He is useful. He is a great defender. He's an awesome cutter. His basketball IQ is among the best in the league, frankly. This is just a no-brainer to me for everyone involved. I love it so much. And I'm really interested to see, what happens with him in the next 24 hours.
Yeah, no, he's a name that I think we brought up going all the way back to the summer or whenever we first started as the season. Once we saw that he was going to play and be available, like, hey, this is especially on an expiring deal. This is a guy, maybe he could end up on a contender, right? Like as the 3rd guard or the 4th guard. The shooting hasn't been quite there yet. He's at 34% right now, but I think we have enough sample size before the injury to feel like it's going to round into shape and he's going to be there. And then you mentioned all the other stuff. He can defend, he can cut really well, so he can play off the ball. He can give you some of the on-ball stuff. And like you said, it's just really cool to see somebody that's battled through the things he's battled through, not just come back and make a, get in the roster, get in the rotation, but then also get paid, get extended off of this. Seems like a legitimate number that's well under the non-tax MLE. So I think that's a fine number. I never know what Chicago's doing. I can't say I hate it, I guess, if they just want to keep him, especially at that number. I suppose that's fine and makes sense.
From all reports, by the way, like he's been incredible this season for all of their young guys. Like Lonzo, anybody that's ever like talked to Lonzo, like just knows he's like an awesome human being. I got a chance to talk to him like a couple times when he was at UCLA. Anybody that's talked to him since he's been in the NBA, just like a really low key, like good dude. Right. So no surprise that he would be an awesome person to have around like young players as you're going through this transitional opportunity. Right. Look, it would make total sense for me if they wanted to keep him. Hilariously, I just got a text from somebody like an NBA executive, right? And it says, when is one of these big time players going to actually go from the Western Conference to the Eastern Conference for once in a trade?
Yes.
Yeah. Which like I feel that for anybody that has to play in the West.
Yeah. I don't know. It is. You want to say it's secular, like it's just gonna, it'll come back around. It just doesn't seem like it ever does. Like it continues to go east to west, and never goes the other way. So I don't know. Maybe we'll get something tomorrow.
It's pretty crazy. Okay, a deal that involved two Eastern Conference teams earlier today. Kyle Kuzma went from the Washington Wizards to the Milwaukee Bucks for Khris Middleton, AJ Johnson, and I believe there's a pick swap in there as well.
Somebody got a pick swap and somebody got a second rounder, right?
Yeah,
the Wizards got the Wizards got a pick swap with the Bucks, and the Bucks got a second round pick from the Wizards, I think. Is that right?
So that would make sense to me, because by the way, like Milwaukee has like very, very little second round pick capital to be able to move assets around with. Frankly, it's like a real issue for them right now as they've been trying to do things. Okay. Big thing worth noting here. This is a shakeup deal, like in a big way. Before we get to like the actual players involved, an important thing to discuss here, and to me, it's arguably the most important thing of the deal, is that this pulls the Milwaukee Bucks outside or below the second apron. That is a huge factor and gives them flexibility to be able to try and move players a few different ways. Now, the other key factor here is that if you look at the difference between Kyle Kuzma and Khris Middleton's contracts moving forward, Khris Middleton next season is owed $34 million. Kyle Kuzma, because he signed that descending scale contract, is owed only $21.5 million. That might be a little bit more, because I think he got like part of a trade bonus for being in this deal, not all of a trade bonus. But this pushes Milwaukee under the second apron, allows them to aggregate players in future trades, gives them real flexibility. That's a very important piece of this. Now, here's the thing. I do not think these players are commensurate with one another at all. Even with Khris Middleton being partially available this season, to where he has played 23 games so far, he actually has only missed like 3 games. Let's remove, yesterday's game or the game 2 days ago from the equation, because it kind of felt like at that point it was fait accompli that he was probably going somewhere. He has only missed 3 games since December 6th. Now, part of the issue is that if you look through like his run of games, he had a goose egg against the Clippers on January 25th. He had a goose egg against Portland on January 28th. But by and large, like Middleton's been pretty good in the minutes that he's been on the court. And by the way, like in this last little run here, these last 5 games, last 6 games, he's played 25 minutes, 19 minutes, 27 minutes, 16 minutes in that Portland game because it was just like a weird game. And then 23 minutes and 26 minutes. So like the minute load is ramping up a little bit. And when Middleton has been on the court, if you look at the actual like numbers in terms of his per 36 averages, they're basically right in line with his career numbers. Like he's shooting 51, 40, 85 right now. He's averaging 20 points per 36 minutes. Last year, he averaged 20 points per 36 minutes. The 3 years before that, he was at 22 points per 36 minutes. He's right around 7 assists per 36 minutes, which is right around what his career averages. And yes, this deal unequivocally is a repudiation of the idea that that the Bucks believe that Khris Middleton can be healthy in the playoffs at that pace of schedule. To me, that's just 100% what this says after back-to-back ankle injuries this summer, or back-to-back ankle surgeries, this summer, where, it feels like the stability, might lead to inconsistent results. I still think I would rather bet on Middleton being good than Kuzma in the playoffs. Like we've seen Kuzma be able to do it at times. Like he was a valuable piece of that Lakers run in the, what was that? That was in the year of a year of COVID, right? And the bubble and everything.
It was the bubble, right? Yeah.
Yep.
1920.
But I mean, I don't know if you guys have watched Kuzma this year. This is a pure bet on if you get him into a more positive environment that he will play more positive basketball. And I was like a big fan of what Kuzma did last year, by the way. Like I thought Kuzma was pretty good last year, but we have not seen anything resembling positive play from Kyle Kuzma this year. He's averaging 15 points on 42, 28, 60 from the field. How he's shooting 60% from the line, I have no idea, frankly. His rebounding is down. His assist to turnover ratio has been like cut in half. Defensively, it's just been like the effort is just like not there. I mean, it truly is like Trevor Helms says in the comments, like how similar is this to a PJ Washington situation last year? It's exactly what Milwaukee is betting on it being, is a PJ Washington situation. I don't know what to think of if that's like the reality here. Because Kuzma's about to be 30.
The funny thing is, if Kuzma doesn't apply his no trade clause that he doesn't actually have, the PJ Washington situation in Dallas never would have happened because Kuzma would have been in Dallas.
A great point, Bryce.
And so I think this is a bet on 2 things, Sam. One, Kyle Kuzma saying, no, I don't want to get traded to the Mavs. I'll stay with the Wizards. And then watching the Mavs go to the NBA Finals with PJ Washington playing a big role, and then coming back to Washington this year and going, man, that wasn't a good decision, and just, whatever. And then Middleton's ankles. Like, I just have to assume, and this sucks, right? Whenever you've seen somebody that's been so important to a franchise that they felt like they had to make a move like this, where they're truly taking a risk. Like, this is a big bet on Kyle Kuzma figuring it out. Cause you're right. Like I was looking at the per 100 possession numbers as you were going through this. Middleton averages more points per 100 possessions than Kuzma does this year on way better efficiency. Middleton's at 51, 41, 85, obviously more assists. Kuzma does rebound, but it's got to be a bet that Kuzma's made a wrong decision, has been regretting it since, and just wasn't able to like lock in and focus and be productive for a Wizards team that we did see him be productive for last season, where it was like, man, the one thing I will say is throughout the entirety of his career, Kuzma hasn't been a great floor spacer. He does shoot high volume of threes, but the percentage is low to mid 30s. I don't know how much that matters, but it's interesting in terms of just spacing. I think he's a guy you have to guard, but it's a bet on him, just like we said with Jimmy, obviously completely different tier of players, but being locked in because now he went from the worst team in the East to a top 5 team in the East.
Yeah. And just like, bizarrely, right? Like you look through the catch and shoot numbers for Kuzma, particularly.
Yeah. What are those at?
So in 2022-23, it was 37.5% off the catch. Last season, it was 35.5% from distance off the catch. Right. So I think I might have gotten that last number wrong. It was 34 in 2022-23, directly off the catch from 3. 2021-22, he hit 36% directly off the catch from 3. So like this year's been a calamity. So like, I'll read off the number just so, you guys can have it. It's 28% this year directly off the catch from 3. So it's right in line with his numbers. But if you get more in line where he's getting open shots, hopefully from Giannis, from Dame, more well-spaced floor from Brook Lopez, you can see a world where this works. The other piece of it that I think is critical, really 2 other pieces let's go with, is first and foremost, Kyle Kuzma, like when he wants to be, is a better defender than this version of Khris Middleton.
What Middleton has left. Yeah.
While the offensive production has basically been similar on a permanent basis for Middleton, I do think he has been substantially worse defensively this year just because he hasn't been able to give the effort on that end. Kuzma's kind of chosen not to give the effort on that end this year. I would hope that improves as he gets to Milwaukee, gets to a team that's trying to, really, really contend for a championship. The second piece of it is just from a roster fit perspective, right? Kuzma does give them like a real counter to a lot of things here. He is capable of sliding down to the 4, playing with Giannis at the 5,
sure,
and then you go like perimeter players across.
Especially with the way that's where his rebounding does come into play, right? Like he rebounds the ball well, so that helps there. Sure.
So here's my only thing about this. If we were doing this, if you're Milwaukee, you're like 7 million, I think, something like that, away from the second apron, right? Like it's in that ballpark prior to this move. I think you're like 7 million away from the second apron. Wouldn't you just like kind of rather have John Collins? And like I would imagine Utah would do, AJ Johnson and Khris Middleton for John Collins, right?
Yeah, I don't know how. I watched a Jazz game today just because I hadn't watched him in a while, and he was really good. Like Collins is having
Collins is having a great year,
and he's honestly volume completely different, but he's a better career 3-point shooter than Kuzma. He's over 45% this season. Same level of rebounder, athlete. I don't know that he has as much I don't know if you can play Collins at the 3 as much as what you can probably play Kuzma as the 3, but neither of those guys are taking the defensive matchups this team really struggles with anyway. Like none of those guys are guarding Darius Garland or Donovan Mitchell or Jalen Brunson anyway. So I don't know that it matters. Like you haven't solved that issue for this, for Milwaukee anyway. So yeah, it would be interesting what Utah's motivation is with John Collins, if they would do that. Cause I think if this was Collins instead of Kuzma, I probably would feel better about it just based on this season, if nothing else.
I think I would too. Like, I guess the Kuzma can play the 3 more effective. Like, I don't think he's an effective 3, like small forward, whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
And like John Collins can't really do that. So maybe that's why they don't want to do it. But
yeah, my gut feeling is Kuzma, Giannis, Lopez fits better than Collins, Giannis, Lopez.
Yeah.
I don't think that makes sense just as I say it. I don't see that working as well.
It's probably true. Okay. Next little piece here to talk about is AJ Johnson.
Yeah.
AJ Johnson is going to Washington here. He has played 45 minutes this season, I don't think that says anything positively or negatively about him, in all honesty. This was never a season where he was going to play.
This. Yeah, we knew this.
He is so far away from the mark physically by NBA standards right now. Like, he's just too skinny and too thin to be able to play. But he is a real fluid athlete with some pop and some explosiveness, with a real scoring streak and real scoring instincts. I buy him as a shooter long term. The question for me, as it was with Milwaukee drafting him, I thought it was a terrible pick by Milwaukee.
Made no
not
sense.
because not because I don't like the player, but because
Doc was never going to play him.
That they were ever going to play him, within the next couple of years. How long can Washington afford to give him? In Washington's case, they can give him a lot of time because they're nowhere near contending. I like AJ Johnson a lot more for Washington than I do for Milwaukee, because Washington has the chance to give him a little bit more developmental time, not even at the NBA level, frankly, just years to let his body catch up and be able to physically be able to withstand the rigors of the NBA, which is something it just can't do right now. But he has a lot of talent. It's just it's a toss up as to whether or not it's going to work. Like, he needs to do so much, room needs to get so much time in the weight room, needs to get so much time developing like his passing ability. There's just a lot that he has to do. But anybody that has seen AJ Johnson will tell you, and I saw him up close. I've talked to AJ, I've seen him in workouts, everything. There's real talent there. I watched him and Ron Holland last year work out on opposite sides of the gym in a workout. And what I would tell you is that AJ gets to his spots easier with less footsteps and creates separation easier than Ron Holland. Now, Ron Holland is 215 pounds and a real defender and plays with real energy. Ron Holland's a better player than AJ Johnson. I'm not comparing the two, but I'm saying that from a scoring, the basketball skill set, AJ Johnson has real gifts that you're going to be able to try to work with as you go down the road of developing him and giving him some time. It's a very proto Anthony Simons kind of hope if you're the Wizards, and I like taking a flyer on it for them.
I remember when I turned on the first Blitz game with him, and I was like, oh, he moves different. He moves different. He has a twitch, and it's not necessarily crazy vertical pop or something like that twitch. It's just he's able to move and slither and smooth, all of that. But yeah, he's not ready. I think the one thing that's interesting with Washington at this point is the balancing act of all of these young guys. Can you put some veterans around them, at least in some capacity, whether it's floor spacing veterans or whatever, because you have the guys from this last draft. You just had you essentially now have 4 first-round picks from this last draft. You're about to have another top 5 pick. You have 3 second-round picks. It would behoove them to push some of those second-round picks down the road in some capacity if they can. But I think they have to be very calculated in, okay, how do we progress all of these guys and make sure we're prioritizing all of these guys moving forward? I don't hate this. I don't hate the idea of AJ Johnson and bringing him in there because he is talented, but then you have to develop him and these other guys the right way moving forward.
Well, and speaking to the idea of bringing in vets and giving them some time, Khris Middleton might be literally the perfect vet for this circumstance. Anybody that you talk to around the league will tell you Khris Middleton's just a really, really nice human being, really, really good human being. No character concerns, really hard, worker, all that stuff. But on top of that, he can't play more than 25 minutes. So you artificially get the leadership qualities, the ability for him to hopefully instill some of what he's shown already onto the younger players. I mean, this is a guy that came up from the mud, had to be a 2nd-round pick, got traded early in his career and developed into a guy that, I don't think he ever made an all-NBA team, but probably frankly should have at one point. He was damn near a top 15 player at his peak. That might be the perfect guy to have around a really, really, young developmental team like this one.
3-time All-Star. That was my thought for the Wizards in terms of, okay, what does that mean for the Wizards and Middleton? If he is at the point of his career where he's comfortable with that, ready for that, I'm with you. I don't think there's anybody better because he's not going to hunt shots. Like you said, he's not going to play 35 minutes. So there's plenty of minutes to go around to the rest of the roster. And he seems like, like you said, a second round pick that carved his way throughout a really, really successful NBA career. So I like it in regards to that. I think it'd be awesome if he's at the point in his career where he would be ready to be that type of veteran presence for those young guys.
So deal that happened yesterday. Caleb Martin for Quentin Grimes and a second round pick. I'm just not totally sure what. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say, I cannot wait to see what Quentin Grimes gets in a contract, because if he doesn't demand like $20 million a year or something, I don't understand why everybody keeps trading him, because the only thing I can come up with is that they don't like that he's just going to ask something ridiculous for a contract.
So like I genuinely started asking around yesterday. I was like, okay, like everything I know intel wise about Quentin Grimes is he's like a good, like there's no issues intel wise. Like he's not a bad teammate. Like he's willing to work. Like none of that's there. So, but like yesterday I started like calling around just to like check myself on that a little bit. I was like, am I missing something here? Like, is there an off court thing that I'm missing? And everyone was like, no. It's just like the contract is a real thing with Grimes, right? Like teams don't want to have to pay the contract. And what I think Philadelphia is making a bet on here is that who's going to pay him this summer? Yeah. Who's going to give him more than the mid-level? I think that if it's the mid-level, they're going to, or like something around that ballpark, they're probably going to be pretty happy to pay it because go ahead.
I was just saying he's had a really nice year. I mean, he he had the year in New York, his second year in the league. He was really good. That next year was up and down a little bit. With New York, he still shot it well from three, and then his games in Detroit were a disaster. But this year he's 46, 40, 77, like plays well. I mean, the only thing I thought from the Dallas perspective was they essentially got a cheaper version in Max Christie, right? I mean, Max Christie's on the books for 7.77, 8.3, and 8.9. But I don't know. Just as someone who's like in a league where people are always asking for 3-and-D wings, this particular 3-and-D wing seems to not be valued whatsoever, especially since he went with a second round pick to Philadelphia. Like, no, not only are we going to send you to Philly, we're going to send a second round pick with you for Caleb Martin, who hasn't been like, I mean, I guess it's the playoff Caleb Martin is what Dallas is counting on. So I don't know.
Yeah. So like Quentin Grimes, like if you remove the first 18 games of the year while he was like getting adjusted to Dallas and everything, he's averaging 12 points, shooting 47, 40, 76, 4 rebounds, 2.5 assists versus only 1.6 turnovers. He defends well. Like he's been a positive player. Like there's not really another way to phrase it. Like Quentin Grimes has been a positive player. Do you know the other side of this? Caleb Martin has not been a very good player this year. Like we can just kind of say that at the end of the day. This deal that we all thought was like really sharp when it happened because Martin was asking for like 460 and then Philly ends up signing him for like 432. And it's like, oh my God, what a steal.
Yeah, I mean, like hand up. I thought it was an insane value and steal in free agency for the Sixers.
And frankly, like $8 million for what Caleb Martin has done this year is still like not catastrophic.
Yeah.
But the issue with Caleb Martin is that, okay, he's 6'5". He's not like 6'7" or anything like that. And Quentin Grimes isn't much bigger either, but he's just a better player. Caleb Martin's also like 6'5", but isn't quite as like quick and doesn't have as many ball skills as Quentin Grimes. I would argue he's not nearly the shooter that Grimes is. Grimes takes them. Martin just doesn't really take them enough, in my opinion. Like he's willing, when he fires, he hits like 37, 36, 38% of them, but he just doesn't take enough of them. So teams don't really care if he's going to shoot out there. And then defensively, like, yeah, he's tough and like he's willing to like guard up the lineup. But again, like Grimes is a little bit quicker. He guards more effectively than Caleb Martin does. But like, as you push Martin up the lineup, he's still kind of just 6'5". And if that's his primary defensive position, which frankly, his primary defensive position does kind of need to be the 3 and the 4 at this point, where he's, 29 years old, going to turn 30 in September before the start of next season. He has 3 years left on a deal at $24 million. I don't mind this at all. Like, I think that this makes a ton of sense for Philly, and it's a big bet that he is, Quentin Grimes is going to get like, somewhere between 10 and 15 million. And as long as that happens, like, they're going to be totally fine with it. The other thing that this does is whether they decide to keep Guerschon Yabusele past the deadline or not, it doesn't really impact their ability to sign him or bring him back in the summer. Yabusele is probably going to get like not the full mid-level, but a real portion of it, I would think. Philly now has something like, I want to say it's like $23 to $25 million or something like that, where they have to sign, I think, like Grimes, Yabusele, and like one other player. And I think they're probably going to be right around that mark. And like, if they can get rid of Drummond, if they can get rid of Eric Gordon, like that opens up the space even more to be able to do things. So especially now that the KJ Martin, contract is off their books and they've been able to avoid the luxury tax, we can talk about the efficacy of having to move 2 second-round picks to get off of a trade asset contract that you basically tried to sign in the offseason, and KJ Martin is a trade asset, and now you're giving up assets to be able to do it. That didn't work out well, but they're out of the tax now. They have a real ability to sign like both Grimes and Guerschon if they keep him. And like, you can see the outlines now of a real roster, I think, around Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid, Paul George. The big piece of this, though, is that I love the fit of Grimes and Maxey together.
Yeah.
Grimes should be the perfect 2 guard to put next to Tyrese Maxey, because Grimes can guard on the ball and guard like point guards at a really, really high level.
Yeah, that gives you a really nice 3-guard combo next season, assuming Grimes is still there whenever Jared McCain comes back, right? And if he's anywhere close to what we saw during the short stint of his rookie season. And I know there's defensive issues, but again, he helps with those. And then, like you said, obviously this all hinges like Paul George, Joel Embiid, can they stay healthy and all that. I think
they're screwed if those guys aren't healthy anyway. Like, this is just rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. Like, if those guys aren't healthy.
Yabusele's been awesome this year. I really enjoy watching him play. I think he's been really good. I watched again a game today with them, and they were using him just like he was just bullying people in the post. He would either cut in there, post him up. They ran a few set actions for him. So, I mean, whether it's there, whatever, I think they would do well to keep it. It seems like he's found a really nice fit there. So bringing him back would make a lot of sense to me, because I think he's been really, really good for them. I am glad you brought up the KJ Martin thing, because it was like, oh yeah, no big deal here. Like, this is essentially a $8 million trade exception or whatever. And then they end up having to attach 2 second-round picks to move it and get off of it. So when we talk about process, not one of the better process moves for having to move a couple seconds.
Yep. Okay. Still overall, like, given where the Sixers were, like, the KJ Martin deal is like a sunk cost at some point. We can talk about the overall, like, big picture process. That wasn't great. What they did at the deadline here, I think, is good and is deserving of credit so far. And we'll see what else they do if they decide to do anything.
Yep.
Okay. Next up here, Jonas Valanciunas is going to the Sacramento Kings for 2 second-round picks. Is there anything else involved in that deal, Bryce?
I did not remember off the top of my head.
Let's see here.
Kings.
CD Sissoko is also
Sissoko. Sissoko to the Wizards. Yep.
So
another
awesome
young
asset
player.
Yeah, first and foremost, like, awesome asset management by the Washington Wizards here, signing Jonas Valanciunas in the offseason, having him for half of the season, and now you get 2 second-round picks and like a fairly interesting young player, like high energy, potential defensive specialist down the road. You don't want to overstate what CD Sissoko is, but like, interesting-ish player that might get cut this summer, but maybe he shows you something in the intervening time that changes that opinion. I love Washington's process here. I love what they've done at this deadline. We talked about it with the Kuzma deal. We talked about it with this deal. Washington is, from a process perspective, been like a real winner for me so far this week. On the other side of it, what do you think of Jonas in Sacramento? Because they very clearly needed a backup center. I just don't know if this is the one that I would have loved.
That's where I landed. I try to see the bright side of things, be positive normally, and especially with this Kings team that has me very fascinated right now, as we talked about with Malik Monk, Zach LaVine. He just can't move anymore. And so it's like, okay, you still have a center who doesn't really protect the rim, isn't super athletic. It just, I don't know. I guess I would have liked something different than what they have in Sabonis in the starting lineup. Even if it's just a high flying athletic rim protector, even if it's not the most solid of fundamentally sound defenders, but just, and I don't know who that guy is, right? It's funny. It made me question my draft process as we get to the deadline and there's so many teams looking for centers. It's like, okay, maybe I should prioritize centers more whenever I do my draft board, because it seems like maybe there's at least teams looking and maybe there's not enough of them right now or whatever. So I like that they address the position. I don't know that it moves the needle based on, I don't think Valanciunas can move anymore, but yeah.
I'm questionable on it, in all honesty. I think Valanciunas is a good high level backup center in the NBA. Right. But I also don't really think that this is you need a counter to Sabonis in the playoffs. If that's your goal, you need something different than him. I almost would have preferred Chris Boucher, even though I don't know that Chris Boucher is an amazing center necessarily.
Well, that's what I think. What about somebody that spaces the floor and then you could throw a change up of that guy and Sabonis together, right? Just to do something different.
With just a little bit of length, right? And the ability to potentially block shots on the interior. Not that Boucher is an amazing shot blocker or anything, right? I just kind of wonder if something like that would have made more sense as opposed to Valanciunas. But Valanciunas is a better player than Chris Boucher as well. So I understand that theory. I understand going to get Sabonis and Valanciunas, they played together with the Lithuanian national team before. So they might have a bit of synergy there that makes you think maybe you could go super big. I don't think that would be successful on an NBA court, but I'm just trying to think through it at the end of the day. I don't know. It's an interesting set of choices here, I guess, from Sacramento. And I don't know if they're done yet. It seems like they're going to see what's out there on the market, and we're going to kind of go through this whole thing and kind of see what sticks.
Yeah. I mean, I still, again, as much as I love DeRozan, I would be comfortable with them moving DeRozan if they can get the right guy. This one was fine. It just was I feel like second round picks just get thrown around all over the place, and seems like you can always go find them in a way if you want. It just doesn't move the needle a whole lot for me with Valanciunas at this point in his career. So,
yep. Okay. Anything else here? Jaden Springer has signed was traded to the Houston Rockets from the Boston Celtics. I think that trade saves Boston $15 to $20 million or something in overall payments from luxury tax to his salary after they sign. So that's why Jaden Springer gets moved here. I mean, Springer can really defend. It's just that the offense is not there.
Yeah, no, I mean, this was one that you kind of heard rumblings of going back a while now, that Boston would potentially make a move like this just to save some money. Daniel Tice is another one to save money.
Yep. That gets New Orleans out of the luxury tax, I believe, as well. Yep. Boston is not out of the luxury tax. They just are saving 15 to 20 million in all of that. Do you think Houston makes any more moves? I don't think they're going to be big moves. The only thing I could see them poking around on is if the Durant thing has gone so far in Phoenix that it feels like it has to end there. then maybe you could convince me on that. But like, it feels like Phoenix is trying to win now. And like, I don't think Houston would offer any of its pieces that help them win now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Excuse me. I think Houston, I think they wait. I want them to wait for what it's worth. Again, I know you and Tim had this conversation. They're a little bit in the OKC last year scenario where people wanted OKC to push in last year. And I was more like, no, let's just see. I'm with Houston. I would rather wait. Like, you're going to be a top 4 seed in the West. You're going to get home court in the first round. Go win a series. See what it looks like. See what Jalen Green looks like in the playoffs, right? See what Şengün looks like in the playoffs. See what a min look. See how teams guard a min in the playoffs and what that looks like, and then make your move in the offseason or whatever. I would wait because I would want to know what some of those guys look like in the playoffs. At least a full series and potentially multiple series.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm at too. I want to, if it's Durant, that's one thing. Like, I'm guessing that it's not really going to make sense with KD and all on. Like, I'm guessing, look, it's Kevin Durant. Like, it's going to be hard to go swing a deal for that person, right? It feels more likely than not that like that would not happen. But if it's him, that's one thing. If it's, anybody else, it's like a lower level player. Like, I'm just kind of letting it rock if I'm them. And now, like, by the way, Jimmy Butler's in Golden State, has signed this extension, right? What does Phoenix do?
Write it out.
Like, what? I mean, like, I'm assuming Nurkic gets moved at some point.
I saw the announcement. It's a good thing they traded that dollar bill for 3 quarters that they're not going to be able to spend now.
So like, they are going to spend one of them on getting off of their
to get rid of Nurkic. Well,
right?
They better get something good in return.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, now that Jonas is off the table, right? Like, what are they going to take back Marvin Bagley from Washington? Doesn't feel like a great plan, right? I just don't, honestly, like, I'm not sure who does the Nurkic thing either. Like, I'm so fascinated to see.
So the names on the market that we would be BI, not a whole lot of smoke around what happens with him. Brandon Ingram, Cam Johnson, Vucevic. Who else? Let me look at the.
So like, are you just speaking generally or for Phoenix?
No, I'm just saying in general, and then maybe we'll land on a name that makes sense for them. Larry Nance, Larry Nance Jr.
Yeah, the big names left for tomorrow are Cam Johnson, who, by the way, like, apparently half of the Nets front office right now is unsurprisingly at the Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper, Kasparis Yakashonas game that's occurring. Brandon Ingram. I mean, like, McCollum, I think that, like, the Pelicans would listen there. I mean, like, Beal, it seems like, is probably stuck in Phoenix. Julius Randle, Nick Claxton, Bruce Brown, Colin Sexton, Yabusele, Robert Williams, Larry Nance, Marcus Smart, John Collins, Anthony Simons, Bobby Portis, like, Vooch, Day'Ron Sharp, Capella's here. Yeah, I mean, there's just it's a lot of names, but I don't know how many of them make sense.
So, like, if you're Phoenix, you're not giving a first to go get Capella for the. I mean,
oh, absolutely not.
So,
yeah,
like, none of
and
those.
Capella makes too much money, by the way.
Like, who of those names are you giving up? Like, that's where it gets hard. Like, giving up a first for those names. Now you're overpaying for a lot of those bigs.
Well, the thing is, though, you're giving up a first to get off of the Nurkic deal. Like, you're not giving up a first to, do X, Y, and Z. You're just, like, giving up the first in order to, like, remove Yusuf Nurkic from your ecosystem. So Like that's the piece of it. But I mean, like, I've been like trying to think like how close can you get on like no, I mean, like Capella just makes too much money anyway, and then they wouldn't be able to sign him as a buyout because he would be too big. I mean, like a Kongwu or Nance, maybe that is a deal that can work, but I don't think they're moving a Kongwu. It seems like to me. So yeah, no, I don't see I don't see a thing that I don't see anything that really works here, in my opinion.
Yeah. And you already gave up draft capital to bring in Nick Richards. Like it's interesting in Phoenix.
Yeah. And like, by the way, if they don't do anything, if they're not even able to get off of Nurkic, which I would imagine they'll still be able to, and you traded that 2031 first for 3 quarters, like you said, I mean, like, my God. What are we doing here? Okay. That's all we got here right now, right, Bryce? I think we're going to call it there. We need to get you to bed early because Bryce and I will be back tomorrow, morning my time, afternoon your time. We will be doing a post-trade deadline show. We will be talking about everything that happens from this point forward until, I wake up in the morning, basically. So I'm excited to see what this all looks like. I'm excited to break it all down as it happens. Like I said, the guys I'm looking at are Cam Johnson and Brandon Ingram. I would say those are the 2 big ones remaining where it feels like Ingram is going to end up being moved somewhere. And then, Cam Johnson, it feels like that goes, down to the wire. They don't have to move him, obviously. So we'll see what happens there. Utah has a few guys that could get moved. We kind of just went through the list of players. I would imagine that Portland's probably not going to move many guys now because they are on fire. Have you watched them recently, Bryce?
I have. They're fun. My guy, Tumani Kamara.
It's driven by Tomani and Denny Avdia. Like those two.
Yeah, Denny's been good. Denny gets to the free throw line all the time.
Yeah. We so the next few breakdowns on the YouTube channel after Deadline Madness, and this will all come like next week moving forward here. I will have, and I've recorded a few of these, Cam Boozer, Asar Thompson, Rob Dillingham, and Denny Avdia. And then honestly, I'm probably going to do Tumani after this too. And just like break down that Pacers game was unbelievable from Tumani. He just like completely shut down Tyrese Halliburton. Last thing here as we go through the Jimmy Butler deal, let's just like finalize it with grades. Let's start with Miami because I think this is like the easiest side of it. Like this is like a, A-, B+ for Miami. Like they just couldn't do any better given the circumstance, I think. Like they did as well as possibly could be done.
Yeah, I struggle a little bit giving him something with an A when we've seen the return that some of other guys have gotten. And if we're going to talk about Jimmy Butler in regards the way we have to give them, like, I would feel more comfortable with the B+ just because it's like you got 1 first-round pick and then whatever someone considers Andrew Wiggins, but they were up against it in terms of his contract and how he had done things and his age and all of that. So I don't want to grade them too harshly based on that.
Okay. I mean, Utah is just like they got in here, they got another 2nd round pick for the Drew Eubanks deal. I mean, honestly, like A- or whatever, like it's a B. It's a whatever you want to grade it. It's like a no cost positive move, in my opinion.
Agreed.
3rd team before Golden State is who?
Detroit.
Detroit. Sure. B-, a little bit less to me than Utah because they're just like taking on money for free.
Yeah, like I mean, I think it will be Detroit's deadline will be graded in totality tomorrow when we see if they truly just took in 3 guys and got 3 seconds or if something else happens or whatever. Like there's still a lot of moving parts. I haven't even tried to consider what I like and don't like yet. So,
okay. Now Golden State. I don't know what to do with this. My reaction is that this is probably a B plus, like a B or a B plus, just because they have now set up their timeline to where, okay, they've got a big three of Jimmy, Draymond, and Stephen Curry. All those guys are out the same year. They expire the same year now in 2026-27. They've set up the books reasonably well. They've only moved one first-round pick here. It's not like a catastrophic situation, it feels like to me. They're going to have to figure out the Kuminga thing. I would almost feel better if they like moved Kuminga for like more assets like into the future. But after this draft, they're still going to have all of their first-round picks moving forward, I believe. To me, it's like a B or a B plus. Like, look, you might be rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, given that this thing is going downhill, but you probably just owe it to Stephen Curry and Draymond Green. If you're not going to trade those guys, and I can't envision a world where they're trading Stephen Curry. If you're not going to trade those guys, you're artificially in between eras. You might as well go for it on some level. This was probably the best move out there for them after Kevin Durant kind of turned down. We didn't really talk about that, but Kevin Durant turned down the ability to go to the Warriors and they decided not to do it. I think this is probably a B plus for me. Like, they're just in a tough spot. Either you're moving Steph and Draymond and you're starting over, or you're going this road. And like, if you're going this road, this is probably as good as you can do. And they didn't hurt any of their future flexibility, really.
I think that's the really important part. You didn't sell on any of your young guys. You still have your draft picks after this specific draft, which is something like it can't just be glossed over. And because you kept that future flexibility, and because Steph is who Steph is, and quite honestly, Draymond who is Draymond, I understand them feeling the need to make some sort of move like this, even though I'm hesitant on whether or not it ultimately pays off. Being able to sync up the contracts, I like that as well, because then they can all just move on at the same time whenever that comes. And you do have an outside chance of like, hey, we get playoff Jimmy when the playoffs hit. Steph is able, as you highlighted, able to take a little bit of pressure off of him, so he has more energy for those moments, and maybe it really clicks. So I don't blame them for it. I just don't know that I absolutely love it, where it would be like an A or something like that. Could be even lower if it was a different team, but in their circumstance with Steph and Draymond at the end of their careers, keeping the future flexibility, I don't want to grade it too harshly.
I agree. Okay. Bryce, tell the people where they can find your work. Tell the people what's going on.
Yeah. At Motor City Hoops on Twitter, on Blue Sky, the Motor City Hoops Substack, the Pistons Pulse podcast, if for some reason you want to listen to just Piston stuff. Otherwise, Game Theory podcast right here with Sam Vecenie.
Go to The Athletic. Keep me employed over there. We're all doing a great job of kind of keeping people updated based on the trade deadline machinations and everything. I wrote about the Lakers earlier today, and I wrote about like they are as well positioned for 2026 as any team in the league right now. Probably more well positioned at this point, other than maybe Oklahoma City. They're certainly more well positioned to go get a second star than anybody in the league that doesn't already have 2 stars, because Luka Doncic in LA is going to be a perfect spot. You have Austin Reeves there already, who you're going to be able to go over the cap hold to re-sign in all likelihood. And you're going to have max cap space in LA in a glamour market. So I've talked about all that, talked about their deadline. Go to The Athletic, read about the Lakers. Trade deadline big board, still up, still rolling. You know, we note when guys get moved on that thing as well. So you'll be able to track who's available, who's not available. And then subscribe to the Game Theory podcast over on YouTube, Game Theory Podcast with Sam Vecenie. Go subscribe to the podcast feeds as well, Game Theory Podcast. So that's all we got. Until next time, which will be in less than 24 hours, we'll talk soon.